This is called fun with acid. I last took acid when I was 19 years old. I've had all kinds of experiences on it, and only 2 were bad. First took acid when I was 14, which was pretty much my year of first for most drugs, except for glue and carbona, and alcohol, which all came at 12. Glue was an interesting drug. It was much more encompassing than carbona, which is a dry cleaning fluid, which explains why your lungs felt clean after inhaling it. There was nothing you could do to get rid of that taste. With carbona, you pour some on a handkerchief and put it to your nose and inhale. I first did carbona up at Alan White's house. Alan was a single-parent kid, and his dad was raising him, or trying to. Alan was younger than me, and really heavy into drugs. Alan ended up dying at the age of 13 after some black guys who had ripped him off of some secondals, threatened to fuck him up after school when their friends who took the stolen secondals got caught being high in class and had to have their stomachs pumped. Alan was so afraid of these black kids, he went home and took the remaining 52 secondals he had and died that night. So Alan's place is where I tried the carbona. Soon after that, it was glue. Glue was the kind of drug that took you to another place. A place where you had weird dreams and all kinds of oral hallucinations. The most common being the buzz. The buzz was a sound, sort of like that of an airplane engine, that got louder and louder. Also on glue, I would always hear someone calling my name, even though there was never anyone ever there calling my name. We had a few places to sniff glue in Fort Tryon Park. One place was called Bums Road. It ran parallel to Broadway, from about Arden Street up at Dongan Place. In the summer, it was covered with foliage, and you couldn't be seen from the street in the day or the night. The biggest problem with glue for me, besides the headaches I started to develop after getting high, was the bad habit I had of laying back with the glue bag over my face. We used to use 2 number 2 bags to sniff from. You'd take the bags, one inside the other, and crumble them up and get them pliable. So when you put them over your face and inhale, the bags would contract and expand. You sort of looked like a horse eating from a bag of feed. The problem was, when you lay back deep into a glue dream, the glue would slide down the bag to rest on your face, and then would dry there. So when you came out of your dream, your face was covered in crusty glue. Very attractive. The favorite glue was Prince's. Testors was okay, but Prince's was the favorite. To get glue, you'd have to purchase a model. The only place that sold you 2 tubes of glue with your model was called Fred the Idiot's. Fred was an immigrant who owned a small candy store and sold 29-cent models and 2 tubes of glue to the kids. Then he would buy back the model for 10 cents. So he really wasn't that much of an idiot, but that was his nickname. You knew you were sniffing too much glue when Fred the Idiot no longer made you buy models and just sold you tubes of glue. Glue mistook your sense of time, similar to acid actually. My worst acid trip happened in 1969, just before Thanksgiving. I got the acids from a friend, Eddie Hand. Eddie wasn't an acid dealer, but I'd gone to grammar school with him, and he knew more of the hippies from Washington Heights than I did, so he would cop for me a lot. This was probably the strongest acid I'd ever taken, but when I got it from Eddie, a piece had already been taken from the tab. I was a little pissed at that, as I was going to split it with this guy named Obie, who was good friends with Stinky. The acid was orange, and sort of wedge-shaped, so it was called Orange Wedge. Obie and I split what we had, and Eddie took the other little piece he had taken and went to see the Rolling Stones in Madison Square Garden. If I was smart, I had gone with him, but instead I told my parents I was going to a concert and I would be out until 2 a.m., but stayed in Inwood. We dropped the acid about 8 o'clock and went to the pool room. Not the best place to trip. Some of my friends were there high on dope, and some were drunk. And the drunks always thought it was fun to mess with guys tripping. So we tried not to let on that we were high on acid. But quickly it became obvious something was up because I couldn't sit in one space and kept moving around the pool room. There was this one really freaky guy whose name escapes me, but he was really gross. After I started to really get off, he got into an argument with another friend of mine. I was having the most intense hallucinations I had ever had, and this asshole yells at my friend and tells him to suck his dick, and he whips it out. It was huge. I think it was the drugs, but the last thing I needed to see was this greasy junkie waving this enormous dick around. So I went to the other side of the pool room. When I got there, this guy Tony, another wethead, had just maced a friend of his for a joke. The guy he maced screamed, put his hands to his eyes, and when he lowered them, his eyes were watering really bad and his face was all red. Again, I don't know if it was the drugs or what, but the next thing I know, Tony found out I was tripping. He came over and sat down next to me and called my name. I saw the mace out of the corner of my eye. This asshole was going to mace me in the middle of the most intense acid trip I'd ever taken. So I got up and ran to the back of the pool room with him yelling after me, asking me why I ran, what's wrong with me. I finally decided to get out of the pool room. OB and I walked down to the projects where he lived. Up until then, my hallucinations had always consisted of mainly walls melting and little things like that. More distortions of reality, but not really hallucinations of things that weren't really there. But this trip was different. The colors were very bright and people's faces took on cartoon qualities. I decided to walk down the block I lived on. Not too smart, as I was supposed to be at a concert. When I walked down Arden Street, I got this intense feeling that I had to go into my apartment just to make sure that I still lived there. This was a really big mistake. I entered the house and my parents were there with my youngest brother in the living room watching TV. They looked at me and wondered why I was home so early. I told them I had a headache and decided to come home. After a couple of minutes, I told them I was going to bed. You know, sleeping on acid is almost impossible. I went into my room and took off my clothes and got into bed. The poster of Janis Joplin on my wall was dancing. After about 30 seconds, I decided I couldn't sleep, and I was on an acid trip with no return ticket. I really felt like I wasn't coming back, and I was going to be like this forever, which was not an appealing thought. So I went out into the living room and told my parents, I have to talk to you. I took some acid, and I don't think I'm coming back. Call a doctor. They couldn't believe that I was telling them this and sent my brother to his room. For the next, I don't know, they interviewed me about my drug history. Being in the state I was in, I told them every drug I had ever taken and where I had gotten the acid that I took that night. I told them about the pot and the pills. They already knew I drank. And worst of all, I told them about the heroin. All they could say was, look at his pupils, which were huge. At this point, I'd only taken heroin 3 or 4 times, and I had no habit, and it only skin popped. I didn't even have a mark on my arm, and I tried in vain to point out where I had injected the dope, and there were no marks. I said to them, look, right here. Put my arm under the light. There were no marks. It was pretty bad. Finally, I went to bed, and after a while, I got to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, I was completely back to normal, or at least as normal as I had been before this trip. But everything had changed. I went out into the kitchen where my mother was, and all she said was, we remember last night. 3 days later, my parents came to pick me up at school and told me they were taking me to a drug program. They decided to take me to the Rockefeller program, which was really just jail. It was a program designed to take care of the overcrowding in the prison system. So if you were caught with drugs and were about to be sentenced to Rikers Island, you could cop out to the Rockefeller program. When you copped out, you signed up for 6 years of your life. You go out to Staten Island and do 6 months, then you were released and would have to report to drug testing every few days at a facility called Edgecombe in Manhattan. Invariably, every guy who went out to the Rockefeller program, first 6-month sentence went immediately to the cooker on getting out. Then his urine would be dirty, and the guy who took the dope knew it, so he wouldn't report for the next test. That day a warrant was issued, and when he was caught, he'd do 90 days at Edgecombe, which was called the Snake Pit. It was too small for the amount of people in there, and people slept on floors and anywhere they could. This went on for 6 years. This was the place my parents were taking me to. They didn't understand what type of place they were sending me to at all. When you signed up more or less voluntarily, like I would have, it would have only been 3 years. But I was still in high school and I hadn't even copped a habit yet. Luckily, my parents couldn't find a place. A cop we asked for directions told us it was in the Bronx, where my school was. But it was actually in Manhattan, in Harlem. So because we couldn't find it, my parents gave up on the idea for the moment. And that was really my lucky day, but things had definitely changed.